Billy, the stalled infrastructure talks.
Yeah, full collapse. President Biden's talks with a group of Republican senators on a sweeping infrastructure package collapsed yesterday, shifting the debate on one of his key domestic priorities. Ongoing meetings between President Biden and West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito fell through after the two remained far apart on a total price tag for a bill which projects should be included and whether to raise any new taxes. Now, any hopes of a bipartisan deal falls on a group of senators that includes Republican Mitt Romney and Democrat Joe Manchin, who met for 3 hours yesterday to hash out details of their own agenda. At the same time, Democrats separately are laying the groundwork to pass some or all of the package on their own through reconciliation. According to the White House, Biden spoke with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer about launching the budget resolution process for Senate votes in July. Let's bring in senior White House reporter for NBC News Digital, Shannon Pettypiece, and co-founder of Punchbowl News, Anna Palmer. She is an MSNBC contributor. Good morning to you both. Shannon, I'll start with you. So what happened here? Senator Capito seemed surprised yesterday when she got word from the White House that Joe Biden was frankly moving on to another option here. What went wrong?
I think a lot of people involved in this process are surprised that this is how it ended. And I know there's been a lot of skepticism from my colleagues on the Hill that they would ever be able to pull something off. But folks that I talked in the administration in the White House, they were really hopeful, I will say, up until maybe the last week or so, that they were going to be able to get something through. What one official told me it really came down to is the fact that President Biden wanted to see a lot of new money going into infrastructure, and Republicans were just mostly focused on trying to reshift money in the baseline, money that had already been allocated to other things like COVID relief or other highway projects, to sort of shift that around, where Biden wanted to see real new money come in. They couldn't agree as well on how to pay for this. Republicans obviously did not want to touch the 2017 tax plan. The White House said, okay, let's try and find some other methods to pay for it, some other things we can do, like increase IRS enforcement, but that didn't seem to be catching on with Republicans either. So, essentially I was told the White House just didn't want to spend more time in what they thought was going to be endless negotiations with Republicans. They didn't appear to be seen eye to eye. So, now I'll say they're not necessarily starting from square one, but they're maybe starting from square 2 or 3. They're really going back to the beginning stages after weeks, and I will say really hundreds of hours of talks between Republican staff and the White House.
So, Anna, this kind of confirms some of the suspicions of Republicans who thought, many of them, not all of them, who thought the sort of attempt at bipartisanship was theatrical and that this was going to happen in the end, that Democrats were going to go the way maybe of reconciliation. So was this outcome inevitable?
I don't know if it's inevitable. I think that both sides came to the negotiating table with, a true desire to try to find a pathway forward, but they still are so far apart. They don't even agree necessarily on what the definition of infrastructure is, and particularly when it comes to paying for it. I think, as Shannon just kind of laid out, they are very stark differences between where Republicans and Democrats are. And now as we shift to this G20, as they like to call themselves, it just gets harder. It's one thing when you have one key negotiator from the Republican side, one key negotiator, the president, on the other side trying to hash out a deal. But now you go into the Senate and there's House members as well, and trying to get all of those different constituencies to agree on anything, I think, is going to be extremely difficult.
So, Anna, we're hearing that now the White House is moving on to a, quote, bipartisan discussion. A lot of people will say, wait, I thought this was a bipartisan discussion. So what happens from here? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? We're in June 9th, and so we're 5 months into this administration. And when you look at the time, it's not on the sides of these bipartisan negotiations. Right now, you do see Republicans and Democrats on the Hill finding this next path that they are going to try to talk about. I do think that this is going to, we're going to kind of see whether or not they can come together on something in the next week or two, certainly before the July 4th recess. Time is of the essence, and Democrats, particularly on the progressive side, have very little patience for this. I think from the beginning, they've been very skeptical that Republicans are going to do anything, right? One of the biggest sticking points has been, how do we pay for this, right? Republicans don't want to do anything except for shift COVID money that they think is unspent to this effort. That's not going to do it for what Democrats want. And so basically you're going to see Senator Bernie Sanders, the Budget Committee chairman, move on his own to try to force this other issue of reconciliation, a budget to go forward. And so you're going to see these two things happen in tandem. And at some point, we're going to really be able to see pretty quickly, I think, whether or not any momentum comes out of this bigger negotiation.
So while all of this percolates back in the U.S., Shannon Pettypiece, let's talk about the president's first trip overseas. What are the clear goals in front of him, and how much of this trip is just going to be pressing reset from the past 4 years, and will that be challenging?
Well, I mean, he's certainly got a big task ahead of him. I mean, not only is there this global pandemic we have going on that's just upended the world economy and the growing aggression from Russia, the rise of China and their dominance. But in order to tackle all these challenges, President Biden needs his allies, needs these Western allies behind them. And so many of them are quite skeptical after what they've been through with 4 years of the Trump administration. You know, and going back through some of the old stories about these G7 meetings, I was reminded of some of the things that went down, like when President Trump then stormed out to meet with Kim Jong-un early and lash out at Justin Trudeau on Twitter. You know, there was so much drama that has unfolded between the U.S. and these countries over the past 4 years. It's really led to nerves and jitters about whether or not President Biden is going to be just a blip on the radar before America returns to this America First nationalist style of foreign policy. And this question about whether the world can trust the U.S. on any international agreements it might enter into, like a Paris climate agreement or an Iran nuclear deal. So the administration acknowledges that that's priority number one, is to restabilize these relationships, to reaffirm America's place at the table, to overcome that skepticism. And then only with that, only with a united front from the allies, can the U.S. and others start taking on these bigger challenges like Russia and China and ransomware attacks and climate change and everything else on the enormously ambitious list of things the president would like to accomplish.
A lot to do. Shannon, thank you. Let's bring